You are listening to It's Later Than You Think. Hello, all you gorgeous people. I hope you are all doing well. It's another Fleeting Moment series, which means it's time for a guest. And my guest this week is Steve Council. After editing this episode, I sat down to write the intro and was having trouble coming up with what to say. Do I take the nice route and say what a good guy Steve is? Do I talk about how funny he is? Or should I let the listeners figure that out on their own? Should I have pretended that he blackmailed me to be on here as a guest? Maybe I could have mentioned that I really don't like him all that much. Alas, I'll just be frank. My conversation with Steve was awesome, and I had such a good time. I think listening back to this conversation, you will too. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Steve. All right. Well, I am so excited to introduce my next guest, Stephen Cornelius Council. I imagine if that was your middle name.
Gosh, it's really close.
Okay.
It's Anthony, actually.
I mean, you look like a Cornelius.
Thank you. Is it my my charming features that gave it away?
Well, it's not your personality.
No, God, no. I hope not.
You know, I often, I think since I'm still young in my podcast career, you get to a moment where you finally have a guest on that you're like so overly excited about. The first few I've had have been awesome. Today's not it.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, it can't be me. Like, who's coming next?
No, yeah. Which we'll get to at a later point. But yeah, it's.
Oh, thank God.
So this is not it. I mean, we'll talk about we have a mutual friend in common, and I'm assuming I owed some favors as to why you're on here.
Yeah, definitely. You're really just sprucing up my ego here is what you're doing, and I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. But no, Steve, it's really good to have you on here.
I'm really excited. This is really cool.
So I've known Steve for 20 years.
Yeah, definitely. Somewhere in there.
So my brother-in-law, good friend of mine, Joe, has known Steve probably even longer.
Yeah, we met in English class in 9th grade.
Okay.
Because his last name is similar to my last name, so he sat in front of me.
Okay,
that's how we met. Yeah, just proximity, right? And we became very good friends.
Assuming you weren't copying off his paper.
No.
That is good stuff. Well, Steve, I was excited to have you on here because not only are you going to bring a fresh perspective to the world around you, but I think some of the topics that we haven't covered on this podcast so far are, the world of work. And you've had a pretty exciting career as far as not only the things that you've done, but also some of the struggles as far as being in that whole phrase of, we talk about open to work.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I'm an open book as well. So I'm happy to talk about all of that.
Yeah, let's take a step back before we get into the question about, what you're doing now. What was your experience like in your kind of your open to work phase?
Yeah, it was really fun. I had a great time. No, sorry, listener, if you'll quickly learn, I tend to be very sarcastic and just whatever. No, it was awful. Are you kidding me? Like, it was absolutely brutal. I had. Let's see what's here. I left a position that I was comfortable in, but I was being taken advantage of. Just being completely honest here. And I felt like I was worth more than that, right? And this really fantastic position just kind of fell on my lap. They're like, hey, you want to join? And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, to the point that when I received the job offer, I was like, yep, that sounds great. I got off the phone and I ran outside and I ran around my house like a madman for 6 times. just to burn the energy off. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing ever. I can't believe it. And it was great. Like, the position was wonderful. Unfortunately, they kind of suffered from a lot of things that other companies did in that like 2020 to 2022 range, where they overhired because revenue was amazing. And they had a mass layoff at the beginning of the following year. So I was only there for like 6 months. And the time that I was there was awesome. And I met some really amazing people. With that, I kind of went through like these stages of grief, like the denial, like, oh, it's a job. I'll totally find another one like super quick. And that didn't happen. There was a long period of time where I was doing interview after interview after interview after interview. It really becomes its own job.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll sometimes see that demeanor and that cadence on, like, say, like LinkedIn, which I'll bring up 100 times probably today, where it's consuming, where it feels like, nope, you don't get to leave work. You're always on that application search. So it was rough. It really was. But what I did find is just to use my own skills, and that is talking to people. And I know it's phrased as networking, which is really just corporate jargon speak for talk to people that have similar interests. Like,
Yeah.
it really is. Like, once I got past that, like, oh, I just talk to people that have similar interests in training and development as me. Oh, that's cool. All right. So I'm going to talk to them. And that opened up these different avenues and doors, which led to ultimately me finding the position that I'm in right now. So yeah, it was an experience, to say the least. And it's definitely one that I didn't want to go through.
Yeah.
But I'm happy I did, in the sense that I learned a lot about myself, what I'm capable of, what my family's capable of, and just the generosity of the human spirit with everybody.
Sure. You had it sounded like you had people, sharing opportunities for you, and
Yeah.
that were there, or
Yeah.
tagging you on LinkedIn to let you know of things that were
Yeah,
opening up.
it was actually really interesting. There was gosh, I can't even remember what the post was on like, I lived on LinkedIn, lived on this site. There was a post, and then somebody commented in there like, hey, I'm thinking about doing these interviews where you kind of set up as like your job resume. If you're interested, let me know. I'm like, oh, that's super different.
Yeah.
So I reached out to her, and I happened to be one of the first people to reach out to her. She's like, oh, okay, let's do this. So we kind of like learned as we did it. It's still, if you feel so kindly, you want to go onto my LinkedIn, you can check it out. But Lydia Smith, shout out to Lydia Smith. She's the one that did it. And it was awesome. Like, it was just a really fun experience. And I got a lot of people to respond to me, say like, oh, you should do this. I even had people like, do you want to do voice work? I'm like, have you? Oh, I don't know. Maybe. But it was just a really neat experience to try these things that, honest to goodness, I would have never done otherwise.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to come back to another question here, but I want to ask and interject here. What advice can you share with someone who is currently open to work, or who has maybe recently been laid off, or has been laid off 6 months ago, and they're starting to lose, either the hope, or they're getting frustrated that,
oh my gosh,
they've gone through interviews, they've applied to dozens and dozens of places. What advice can you offer? Because again, how long were you laid off?
My layoff journey started in January, and I started the position I'm in right now in December. So I was almost
a year.
full year. Yeah.
Okay.
And I went through the whole gambit of things. I mean, I applied for positions that I knew were out of my reach, but I also applied for positions I knew that were like almost remedial in like my
Okay.
skill set. And it was funny to hear the responses I would get where it's like, you're overqualified. Or my favorite was, we think you're going to be bored. It's like, um, thanks. I don't know. How do I take that? I had a gentleman say, I would hire you, but I think you would take my job. That was a response. It was an honest to God response. And I thought, oh, I wasn't trying to do that. I just want something that I can make an income with. But at least I applauded his brutal honesty. Hey,
Yeah.
cheers. I get it. My advice is probably going to sound cliche and corny because it's what a lot of people say. And that is just do not give up. And I cannot stress enough the power of networking. I can't. Honest to goodness, this is a full blown true story. How I landed in the position I'm in right now, it wasn't even posted. It was, I spoke to a distant family relative and was like, hey, I know you happen to work like through corporate consulting here in Wisconsin. If you happen to find, or you hear a CEO say, gosh, I just really love training. I'm like, ooh, okay. Like that's me.
Eh,
So I gave him my resume. Like I
okay.
gave him a copy of my resume. Like if you'd be so kind. And as a matter of fact, I brought my daughter with me because school had started and I was waiting to take her. Like whatever. Like through this like coffee chat that I had. And about a month later, I received a phone call. I was on a bike ride because, like, what else am I doing besides applying to 50 million jobs? Yeah, that's fun. I get this phone call while I'm on this bike ride, and I thought it was spam. I thought it was a telemarketer, and I, of course, I'm like, yeah, I'm not answering that.
Yep.
And they left a voicemail, which in this modern era, who leaves voicemails? Give me a break, right? Like, who does that? Unless it's serious. So I listened, and it was this very lovely woman, like, hi, I have your resume, and we're interested in pursuing you. No, this is like some like multi-level marketing
Yeah.
baloney. No way. So I went and I looked them up and I was like, oh my gosh, it's a real company. And this is a real person. Like she's on LinkedIn. Like
Eh,
I can see her face. So I called back and the rest is really history. Like what ended up happening is the gentleman I spoke to gave my resume to the CEO and says, hey, you were telling me that you're interested in pursuing a training department. Here's this gentleman that's looking for a position. She went, oh, cool. Walks over to her director of HR, who had only been there for about 2 weeks, and goes, here, you should call this guy.
oh wow.
And that's how it happened. Like, that is really it. So I guess the crux of that story is sometimes it just comes to reaching out in the most different place. Like just touch base with people. The whole coffee chat thing is real. It is
Yeah.
so real. Just get to know them and maybe they won't be able to hire you the next day, but people talk. And if you're kind to them, they're going to repay you that favor in value later.
That's a great example, great story. And Steve, to be honest, that's exactly how it worked for me when I left teaching to get
Oh, no way.
into the learning development field. I worked in manufacturing for almost 3 years, and I started in 2018. But that was the same thing. I had reached out to the alumni advisor at my alma mater and
Yeah.
said, "Hey, I'm leaving teaching," and at the time I was bartending. Um, while I left my teaching job, and I just
Yeah.
needed a few months to just kind of get my head right. And I reached out to the alumni advisor, and she's like, "Yeah, resume looks good, cover letter's awesome. Have you done any networking with people that had, you know, gone to school here?" Like, I don't really know anybody. I went part time and don't really keep in touch with anyone. Oh,
Yeah.
just go to our page, search for people that are in learning and development, maybe message a few people that are and see how they got their jobs. And that's exactly what happened. I reached out to 5 people. A few people wrote me back. I had probably a week-long random back and forth email with one of the guys, and he said, hey, we don't have a position now, but I would look into training and development in manufacturing because I know places are starting to really build up their departments. Great, thank you. A month later goes by. He reaches out to me and he says, hey, I couldn't tell you about it at the time, but we have this position that's finally okay to hire. It's a training and development specialist. You'd be in our department of 4. Are you interested in interviewing? Yes. So went an interview, got the job.
That's awesome. Like, exactly. That's what I'm getting at is you put yourself out there, which I know is tough, especially when you feel like you're just getting beaten down by the endless, like, sorry, we've chosen a different candidate, or my favorite, like the non-existent email that you just pretend came. Like,
yeah,
they went with someone else clearly. And then you see it reposted again, like 2 weeks later, like, okay, cool. I get it. The frustration is real. But I do agree with you. Just putting yourself out there will pay off in dividends. And it's sometimes in those really unlikely places that you just don't think of that something emerges and you end up really liking it.
Yeah.
I'm glad you actually mentioned that about the your teaching then transforming, because listening to your original podcast, like the first couple episodes, and I think I talked to you about this offline, where you mentioned that story about you coming up to the yellow light. You're like,
yeah.
oh, thank God. Like that's,
Yep.
I get that extra 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what really drove me from switching jobs when I was to the position that I thought was really going to be my forever home. Sometimes you just have to do what's in your heart. You have to go and pursue the things that you feel are holding you down and elevate above them.
Yeah, that's great. Now, Steve, we're both in the learning development fields.
Yes.
And I wanted to get your take on what trends do you see impacting this field in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, I think we can mention AI, but
yeah. Oh my God. I know, right? Everything AI this, AI that. Which it's fine. Like, am I thinking that AI is going to take over our jobs? I genuinely don't.
No.
And I know that there are some individuals out there that feel like the sky is falling. And I'd love your take on this too. I look at AI as a supplement. Like, it's something that sometimes when I'm trying to come up with something, a way to create an exercise, let's just say for a class on a specific topic. Yeah, I'll enter something into Chat GPT and it'll spit out a couple ideas like, oh, yeah, that's okay. I kind of like that. And then I'll tweak it and try to make it fit, the criteria of what I'm looking for. But I certainly would never in my wildest dreams rely exclusively on AI to create content. Like, sorry, to me, I feel like I'll read some stuff. I'm like, this is uncanny valley. Like, no, there's no like personality behind this. It's just, I think that's where learning and development and the creative sectors of our society, I think that's where we're somewhat safe. I know there's talks of using AI for filmmaking and all this stuff. But there is a human element that causes us to relate to the content. Like, we have that experience, therefore we can relate. We can sympathize, we can empathize, we can kind of live through the words or the visuals of the medium, where AI can't, at least not yet. Give it 5 years, who knows? Somebody might be listening to this on their Skynet phone that's about to attack them and like, you dummies. But who knows? But as far as, I don't know, trends and whatnot, I look at all sectors of training and education, it really doesn't matter which way you splice it and cut it. I kind of look at it as like this pendulum. Like right now, um, we're kind of swinging back from, well, everything can be virtual. Everything is totally cool to be virtual. And you're getting this kickback of like, but there is something nice about in class and in person. And then eventually a couple of years is going to go by and people are like, that's the way my grandpa did it. No, we have to go back to virtual and then swings here. So I guess the way I view it is the criteria is always the same. People, you want someone to walk away knowing more than they came in with. Isn't that really the point? Like learning and development is so the employee can learn and develop their career and their success. Like, that's it. Like as long as we stick to that, it doesn't matter the super secret buzzword of the day or the software, the programs. It's always the same.
99% of the time, I want to be facilitating training in person.
There's a beauty to it. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think you have that personality. You have that outgoing personality. I think there's a self-deprecation to it, right? Where you don't, it's okay to make fun of yourself.
Yeah.
And I think you have to have that if you're going to be a public speaker of any variety. You have to be willing to say, yep, my voice, I know it's nasally. Strap in, folks. Like this is what you get. Cheers. And they can either laugh with you or eventually they might come around to you. But yes, there's an absolute beauty to being in person.
Yeah. I think it leads to, I mean, the activities you can do, the small group to large group feedback and the conversations that happen that way. Now there's a couple things at my work that I do virtually, and those are more of speaking of coffee clubs, we have those bi-monthly, just kind of some random topics that we discuss. And those are good because everyone can participate that's around. And those are just very casual. But when you're getting into like specific topics for whatever industry you're in, I really think the benefit of having someone in person is almost immeasurable at times.
Yeah. It personalizes it. I know that sounds like just obvious. Like, yeah, a person's in front of you, therefore it personalizes it. But that's really tough to get that connecting point on a Zoom or even like a video, which I love videos for training, for like quick bite-sized education pieces. But I don't look at that as a replacement for the in-person factor at all.
Yeah, I like to throw in a couple, whether it's Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, some of those just super strong.
Yes. You're speaking my language with Brene Brown. She's like,
yeah,
she gets me right in the heart, right in the feels.
Some really, really good ones there.
Well, I'm curious. Let me spin it back to you. Are there certain trends or things that you see coming down the pipeline?
It's interesting because aside from, the AI, which again, I don't think it's going to be taking over anything in our field necessarily, just the supplement as you mentioned. But yeah, I'd be surprised if, the virtual went away. I think that's still going to be a component as far as some of the opportunity, especially with cost savings for different organizations. The big push obviously right now is the little acronym of DEI that people are afraid of, which I like spell out. It does mean something. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So, the more you learn.
And it's great because you can ask someone individually, which part of that don't you like? Do you not like diversity, or equity? Oh, you don't like fairness. Okay.
Yeah.
Or being inclusive. Yeah, I like to keep people out too. But with that, I think obviously that changes, whether it's you change your DEI phrase to culture and belonging or some sort of inclusion. I think that's obviously still going to be there. And companies that have gone away now from using the phrase DEI, they're not, I think I'm assuming a majority of them are not going away from their DEI practices. They are just going away from the phrasing, and they're going to come out and say, we're not doing this anymore. But you'd
I think
think
you nailed it with that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I
no, you're
think you
fine.
nailed it with that. Is we're kind of stepping those boundaries of like the politics of things, but I think it's strictly the naming convention,
Yeah,
right? Like it's kind of the well, that's the taboo phrasing we don't want to be associated with right now. And I love that you said, what was it, a company and culture, well,
yeah, like culture and belonging or
culture and
something along.
belonging. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, you're right. It's going to be just renamed as some other factory processed corporate jargon, and people are going to go, "Oh, well, that I agree with." It's like, what? Like, it's the same thing. Whatever. I
yeah,
think we could talk at length about that, but we
sure.
don't want to. We
But
don't need to bore anybody.
I think, I guess, and maybe I haven't done too much of a deep dive into trends, but think going forward, as far as the management training side, what are new skills that employees have to really grasp? And I think one thing I'll mention is something I've designed at my organization is a training on multi generations in the workforce.
Oh,
Because
I love it.
yeah, as of right now, as of today, 2025,
Mhm.
you've got 4 to 5 different generations in the workforce. Gen
Yeah.
Z
Oh, yeah.
are now in the workforce, and it's a really good training that I as far as, I'm not just saying, oh, toot my own horn, but as far as the
No.
the in person conversation, because again, you throw out the DEI word, some of those trainings are going to be a little uncomfortable to have, whether it's having difficult conversations,
Hmm.
but you get in the generation thing, it takes a little bit of fun, because you've got some baby boomers still in the workforce, you've got some Gen Z, and you put them in a room and say, hey, this is typically what boomers are like at the workforce, this is typically what
Oh,
Gen
yeah.
Z are like, and then they either laugh at each other or laugh with each other, and you get that like camaraderie of
Hmm.
like, you guys always do that. Yeah, you do that too. Or yeah, you're right, I am like that. But also, it could go cross. It could be like, I'm actually more like a Gen Xer, even though I'm Gen Z, or I'm more of a millennial, even though I'm a boomer. And I love that. How can we work with each other versus always so opposed?
Oh, I absolutely. And it's funny you say that. I was very fortunate due to my networking that a very wonderful
On
woman out.
LinkedIn.
This was not on LinkedIn, actually. Um, a very wonderful woman out of the Menominee Falls Chamber of Commerce. She had asked if I would do a train a class on exactly what you just said, the multi generational aspect of the workforce. Um, I loved it, and I felt like the group really liked it too for exactly all the same reasons you did. I remember finding a video online of it might have been a TikTok or something like that, that somebody was flipping through pages that represented how the current, I guess, generation in power felt about the younger generation. And it just continues to flip all the way until you get into like the BCs. And it's like Aristotle claiming that people that shave their beards are lazy. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, and the whole group, and yes, you had the whole range of individuals in that group, and they all got a chuckle out of it. Like, yeah, so the whole like the younger generation's lazy. It's not new. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't, it hasn't changed, so stop it already. Like, it just, we're over it, we're all done. I find that stuff fascinating. I do. I think part of it is because I remember being at a job and I was talking to a guy that was like a year to my senior,
Yeah.
and he made a mention. He's like, oh, millennials, they just don't want to work. And I looked at him, I go, we're millennials. And the look of horror on his face was like, wait, what? Like, yes, according to the actual like demographics and like the years that we were born, yup. And he just like his head exploded, like he couldn't figure it out. What? And I think there's that misunderstanding a lot of people have, that you kind of mentioned, where you have that bleed through. Oh, I'm technically millennial, but I have Gen X tendencies. Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever, it's fine.
Switching gears a bit, rather impressively, you're off social media for the most part.
Okay, I kinda.
Yes.
Because I mentioned LinkedIn,
Yes.
and I am also a an avid Redditor, if you
Oh,
will.
love it.
Um, but I think I like Reddit anyway, and at least LinkedIn to a degree, because it I can curate what I'm seeing. Like if
Yes.
I just, you know what, my wife is watching The Real Housewives of insert a county, and I am like, I don't want to listen to these people yell at each other. I can just zone out and like read all about the Legend of Zelda, like whatever. Like, or there's like training and development subreddits, or like I want to just look at stupid memes or whatever. Or I can curate my experience to that where I didn't feel like I got that kind of feedback from things like your Facebooks and TikToks, and I don't know. I've never even tried TikTok. I'll be honest, nor Instagram, and I don't know. I don't even know all the ones that are out there. Like
Yeah.
now I sound like a boomer. Like I don't even know what's out there.
Damn kids and their rock music.
Yes. How do I work the remote? Like I don't know. I don't know. It just hasn't. It's never interested me, I guess is what it is. And I feel like Facebook in specific is probably what turned me off more than anything.
Mhm.
Um, I jumped onto the Facebook bandwagon when you had to have a college
Gosh,
email.
20. Yeah, the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
iteration was
I
college.
believe the term is OG, Patrick. Keep up. Come on.
And Steve, the Facebook.com.
Uh
The Facebook.
pardon me. And I can be quoted as this all day long. I remember I had all my little college friends. They're like, you got to get on Facebook. And I used to call it the Kool-Aid. Because I'm like, what? You guys want me to
Yeah.
drink it? And, yum, yum. And finally I broke down and did it. And I was on it for like whatever, however long, 5 years or something like that. And I just felt like it didn't benefit me at all. Like there was never a point I'm like, thank goodness I'm on this. Like I learned something new every day. Nope. I was just getting like, oh, this person's mad at this person, or this person's relationship's complicated now. Like, ooh, like what am I benefiting from this? So I just stopped. I just kind of
It,
walked away.
it's gotten worse, and you
God,
save
I
so
can
much
imagine.
time. You save so much time during your day by not doom scrolling on your Instagram, on your Facebook. I do have both Facebook and Instagram. I do not have Snapchat. I do not have TikTok. I clearly have LinkedIn. Reddit is probably my favorite. The rabbit holes that I go down
Yeah.
are unlike anything else. Or I think the newest thing in the last year or two is going to your browser, Google, Safari, whatever it is. If you have a question, you just end it with Reddit. Someone has already asked that question in
Oh,
the
it is.
history of time, and
Mm-hmm.
it's fantastic because
Yeah.
I don't want to share my search history for Reddit, but some of the most random things that pop in my head, and I just type in Reddit. Someone's already asked this at some point, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the one thing I have really enjoyed about that specific social site is I do feel like I walk away like maybe having learned something like,
Mhm.
oh, that's kind of neat. Like there is an entire subreddit of today I learned, and
Mhm.
it's just like factoids that people put in from like Wikipedia or
Yep.
whatever. And I'll be like, well, that's fascinating. I don't know. And then sure enough, it'll be like 2 weeks later, and I'll recall that during a conversation, like, oh yeah, I did know that. Holy smokes. That's so cool. Like so it's in that sense, I like learning stuff, which I think, given your profession and mine, makes a lot of sense. We
Yeah.
just like learning new things and gaining new perspective, which I get from even LinkedIn to a degree, just getting an understanding of different professions and how they interact with the world. I think that's fascinating. great. I learned something from that. That's cool. I will admit, when it comes to like politics or anything that like kind of touches on those like naughty three, I'm
Yep.
like, I just like, ugh.
Yeah.
I'll pass that. I'll scroll past that. Or if it's like the same person, I'll be like, let's block you, like get you out of there, because
Yep.
I don't need it. Like, and I think the rest of us, we're just tired of all of that. Like, let's just,
For sure.
can we just let me have my mindlessness for a moment, please? That'd be
Yes.
great.
It's most of the time it's not going to be a productive conversation anyway.
Mm-mm.
So until people learn how to discuss it respectfully, whatever the topic is, any of those big three that you mentioned,
Yeah.
it's not going to be. And at one point, that's like with people commenting on. Speaking of Facebook, just going on and on, replying to comments back and forth,
Yeah.
and I'm like, you're wasting your energy. Two, you're getting yourself stressed out for no
Exactly.
reason.
I
One
can't
last
imagine. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to mention one last thing about Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of early on the Facebook, you mentioned how some of those relationships it's complicated.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Yes.
They used to have an option, and I'm not, if someone correct me after this is released, but I am like 99% sure they used to have an option where single, married,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, maybe it's complicated. They had a button that said married but looking. Like I just remember this from 20 years ago. Like, that's amazing.
I guess they know their demographic. Like, whoa. Okay. That is some ballsy decision making there. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
That's insane. Wow. Okay. I don't know what to say to that. What I was going to mention was I would love to be wrong on this. I have a feeling it is roughly 0% of people leave one of those kinds of like online discussions. I guess we're
Yeah.
going to be professional about it. One of those and go, you know what? They have a valid point. Like, no. All you're doing is attacking each other. You're just yelling at each other and then thinking you're going to browbeat them into submission with your ideas. It's not going to happen. All they're going to do is they're going to get off and just yell about you in real life, like complain about you in the car, like
exactly.
Joe 5892 doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, then they'll have that shower thought of like, oh, I should have said this.
Gotta put that on Reddit.
Yeah.
Chat with us.
Yeah, like, I'll get them. Like, why? Like, you're not doing anybody a favor. It's just division and I don't know. I'm done with that. Get that out of there.
Yes. All right. My next question is going to be more of a story that I would be remiss if we didn't let the internet know about an incident that took place. This is close to 20 years ago.
It is.
That I will say changed our lives forever.
And jury's out if for the better or not.
Yeah, I don't know. In time, we might find that out. But there's a little, very small, private group called the Ugly Club that Steve and I are part of.
Aren't we the only members?
Yeah. Yes. I didn't want to sound too pathetic, but we are the only two members of what's called the Ugly Club. Mm-hmm. And you can be extra thankful, listeners, that this is audio only.
Yeah, actually, the amount of blindness that would have increased if you put this in any visual format.
I feel we should give a backstory of how this came to be, but let's go back 20 years ago. Steve, I'd probably known you less than a year, maybe.
Yeah.
At the time. So again, going back to our mutual friend, Mr. Joe, the three of us were out like on a Friday or Saturday night, like typical 21, 22-year-olds would be out in the town.
Very responsible.
We were at a banging bar called Boomers out in the Lake Country area of Milwaukee, little town called Pewaukee. This bar I do not believe is open anymore, and maybe they shut down because of us. But
They've never been able to just wash the stains of us being there.
but Boomers was a sports bar up on the top main level, and then the lower level was more of a club. Because I remember
Oh,
going down there
that was a
and
sports bar on the top? I thought it was
on
like
the top.
like a country. But oh, maybe it was sports.
Yeah, it was more of the sports thing. I mean, they
Oh,
had the pool tables, they had
yeah.
a bunch of TVs at my recollecting
Got
recollecting
yeah.
or time.
Maybe it was just like the Toby Keith that was blasting that gave me the impression
That
like, well, I guess this is I don't know. Because I always
should have
thought
been.
it was weird. Like, what am I doing in a country bar? Like, I don't know, whatever. I'm sorry.
Well, we were in Lake Country, so maybe that was part of it.
Who
So
knows?
downstairs they had the club. The DJ was playing. It was very loud in there, and young, three young 20-some-year-olds were down there having drinks, probably
Mhm.
looking around at the clientele. And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but at one point we kind of locked eyes with a very young, I recall, very attractive young woman
Mhm.
that was walking
I
towards
hope
us.
she's listening.
I hope you are. Felicia or Brittany or
Mercedes.
Mercedes, whoever you were walking towards us. And at what I recall happened was, Steve, you and I were like standing next to each other, like shoulder to shoulder, we'll say. And our mutual friend, Joe, was behind us. We're
Mhm.
all kind of there huddled up talking, but he
Yep.
was behind us.
Mhm.
So Mercedes, will say, walks towards us. And now you and I are like, okay, looking
We're
forward to,
we're gonna chit chat.
yeah. And as she's walking towards us, she basically takes both of her arms, extends them forward, like parting the sea. Imagine, someone just coming up, and what I recall was the biggest shove of my life.
To
Her
your
taking,
ego.
yes, and just completely, like, it was almost a superhero, just shoving two gentlemen out of the way.
I still remember like her. She kind of did her hands in like the prayer form, right? And
Yes.
like poked it between us and pushed us away, like literally separated us. Like, excuse me.
Immediately, as we are probably shoved, anywhere from 10 to 20 yards away,
Easily.
to go right up to Joe to talk to him.
Who
We
had
didn't
no
know,
idea she existed. Like, he was
no,
doing his own thing. Yep.
he didn't know her. We didn't know
Mhm.
her. And she just had locked eyes with this guy. So that was a little bit of a ego.
It's a humble sandwich.
Yeah. And immediately we both went to, wow, is it our looks? And that led to, I mean, I don't know how much therapy
Oh,
you went through, but
I don't know. How much time do you have? So much.
so essentially what happened is Steve and I started joking with each other over the years, whether it was we would randomly see each other out
Mhm.
at other events, or family friends, obviously with Joe's family, and
Mhm.
we would see each other there, or random texts. We have utilized LinkedIn in our conversations over the years, and we've always found a way to top one another with our stories about being in the Ugly Club. It gets a little extreme. I don't even think we could share some of the things we've said to each other on here.
It usually has to do with just like how like radioactive, like just how repulsive we are, and it all stems from what I really sincerely believe it. I do. I wholeheartedly believe this, that whole scenario is kind of like we've all done this. Like, you see somebody and you're like, "Oh, I recognize them." And you wave to them and then they wave and they walk past you because there's somebody behind you, and you do the, "Oh." gosh, I really hope nobody saw that. Like, okay. And I really think that's probably what happened. And this woman is like, who are these two disgusting beings? Excuse me. And there's Mr. Joe just being handsome as always.
Ugh.
We're like, oh, got it. On this topic, I know this isn't
Yes, this is great.
this isn't visual at all, but I want to make it a point to show you that ever since then, you have been in my phone as this
Ugly Patrick Aylshire.
ugly club Patrick Haleshire. So anytime you call or you send me a text, I'm like, oh, it must be an ugly club update. Like, okay, let's do this. So just to make sure that I always remind myself that I'm a part of such an organization. Like,
That's really good. I feel bad. I purposely haven't saved your number.
oh,
Yeah,
it's a good call.
yeah. I mean,
I don't blame you.
yeah. I did block you, but
Oh, that's fine. So you did have it saved. You just, okay, in a different way.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, if you're listening, well, Bridget, maybe, if you want to come on the pod at some point and explain your side of the story, that'd be great, because it's been 20 years of living hell. I will tell you.
You and I have talked about this, that the amount of attention that you and I have given this woman easily surpasses, like, exponentially what she did to us. But she lives in infamy, rent free in our heads, rent
Yeah.
free. You know, like, you're a fresh 21, 22-year-old, like, nothing can damage you except for that. Like, she had like the punch that actually like pushed our souls out of our bodies, like, whoa, that kind of thing. And I think it's funny that there is a woman out there, wherever she happens to be, and I hope she's living a wonderful life, that we still talk about to this day, but she has no idea who she is. Like,
Yeah.
that's just it. She's just like, I was at Boomers once and these two guys were in my way. Like, oh, okay. But we, to this day, as 40-plus-year-olds, go like, remember? Yeah, I do. I remember.
I want her story to be, I was at this bar called Boomers, and I saw this guy. He was a perfect 10, which was Joe, obviously.
Yeah.
But there was a couple guys I had to get through that were probably 9.8s. And so I delicately moved them, and I forgot how I've been throwing some weight around, forgot how strong I was, and had to go talk to the 10, but and the side note about the Ugly Club of why it's only the two of us. Joe was jealous for a time that he was not part of the Ugly Club, and
That's
we
right.
specifically said, you will never ever be in, because
I think there was a moment we talked about making him an honorary member, but no, like, come on, that's not fair. Like, you can't have 90s Brad Pitt in the Ugly Club. Like, that's, get out of here.
No.
Get that out of here. Come on. No, he's already got everything. He's already got the looks. Come on. Like that. If you can't make fun of yourself, what the heck? You have to be able to rip on yourself.
Steve, outside of the workday, what are some of your hobbies and passions?
Excellent segue. Watching paint dry. Staring longingly out the window. No.
Great.
I have two kids. So the ability for me to have hobbies and passions is hard. I guess well, to a degree, right? I guess if I'm going to answer this truthfully and heartfelt, the core part of me is still there, that I love my music. I love watching a great movie. I like a really good book, which I don't know why anybody would not want to read a bad book. I like to be active, but I really have over the years kind of turned into that, like, I like to do stuff with my family and my
Yeah.
kids. And it's fun now that my son is getting older, so I can like slow drip things to him, be like,
Yeah.
ooh, what do you think of this? Or, ooh, what do you think of that? And then I can also take part of his passions too. Like as an example, I used to, growing up, I used to think, and I know this is probably going to turn people off, I used to think Star Wars was the dumbest thing. I was like, Star Wars sucks. I don't like Star Wars. But then my now soon to be 9-year-old, a couple years ago, got really into it. Like he just, whoa, I got to know about it. I'm like, all right, man, I tell you what, I'll watch the original 3 with
Sure.
you and we'll see what you think. And he just fell in love. And I fell in love with it because he did. Like,
Right.
so I started to know the characters and the backstories and whatnot. And I'm nowhere near like galaxy brain that, like I can name planets and what I don't know any of that. I know the very fundamentals of it, and that's enough. But I like just being able to explore new things and try those different things. Um, but yeah, I still love my music. I still am constantly listening to music, all varieties. I'm the question that people hate the answer to of what kind of music do you listen to? Oh, everything. It's like, that's not true. Mm-mm, that's not true. But I do. I have a very vast amount of different genres of music that I do like to listen to. It's all mood dependent or maybe what I'm doing. I'll do that. As far as movies, I like the um like dramas or like your serious films. I also like your just slapstick stupid, like your Dumb and Dumbers and whatnot. But then I'm also an avid horror movie fan. Like I love horror movies. And my wife hates them. So I always watch them by myself in the dark. And I'm like, ooh, like and of course, because I have children, I watch them with subtitles like a savage. So I'm reading this as I'm trying to get like scared and immerse myself in all of this. Like, but that's all good. That's totally fine. And you mentioned Brene Brown. I love her stuff. I love her work. So I like to read her a lot. But then I also like the classics, your Great Gatsby's and Dante, Divine Comedies, and all that kind of fun stuff.
That's great. I also thought of two. Mel Robbins is another one I
Oh, I'm not
really like as
familiar.
well. Okay, yeah, look her up. She's
Oh,
another
okay.
kind of in the Simon Sinek and Brene Brown
Very
realm.
cool. Yeah, I do enjoy me some Simon Sinek. Sometimes he'll say things I'm like, I don't know about that. But I do like a lot of the core of the things that he does cover. I think most profoundly the finding your why is
Yeah,
very that really changed my perspective on things of just being able to navigate that decision making of going, okay, I really this is what I want to do and this is my why. This is what I want to pursue.
he's got two good videos I've shared. Have shared in separate trainings.
Mhm.
One was on how to have a difficult conversation,
Oh,
and then another one was on manager versus leader.
oh, sure, sure.
So I think that's a
Hmm.
those are 3-4 minute clips, which are just gets to the point
Yeah,
what you're
he
trying to
has a
do.
really fascinating way of taking a rather complex topic and just
Yeah,
breaking it down to its fundamental roots and making it very digestible. And I applaud him for that.
you touched base on this a minute ago as far as your favorite. Or you have so much variety of music and
Yeah,
movies and all that, but if there was a band that your go to, or maybe
mm,
let's talk about concert. One you've seen in
sure.
concert that you're like, oh, they're back on the calendar. I'm definitely going.
Mm. Oh my gosh, I used to be an avid concert goer. Like through my teens, probably up to like my mid 30s, and really pre kids. And
Yeah,
it's not their fault. It's not their fault. It's just your priorities change.
correct.
Yeah, I'm talking hundreds of concerts. It's one of my favorite things. Like if I can see a band live, there's nothing that beats that. Like that is just there's an energy and you're just it's awesome. Um, As far as a favorite, though, gosh, that's really, really tough.
Tough.
Um, like, I'll put it this way. I just recently bought tickets to go see Nine Inch Nails in Minneapolis. I'm upset they're not coming to Milwaukee because I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to Minneapolis for this one because I've seen concerts in Chicago. So, like, I
Yeah.
thought a change of venue would be really nice. But then the concert that I went to prior to this was a Lindsey Sterling concert that I wanted to go to. Like, so when I say like I have this like very wide variety of things that I like to listen to, I genuinely mean it. I kind of bounce around. Like, if I'm at work, some people are like, I wonder what he's listening to. It's like, oh, I'm probably just listening to the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, like whatever. Or they might catch me listening to Slayer. Like, oh, okay, yeah, those fit. But it's just really all depending on whatever the mood and the variety is. As far as a specific concert or a band, if they're going to come around, I'm a huge Metallica fan.
Yeah.
I really enjoy them, and believe it or not, their concerts within recency have become more family friendly than they've ever been.
Okay.
I was debating about even taking my son when they came to Chicago recently, but I missed the boat when tickets went on sale, and by the time I made that decision, tickets were like $500 a piece. I'm like, I love you, but I'm not spending $1,000. Like, sorry, dude. But if they were ever to come back around, like within the next year or so, I would certainly debate having that conversation because they do put a great show on. But then sometimes you get these real small, intimate concerts that you can see that are almost better. I had a friend of mine. This is probably 15 years ago, if not more. He and I went to go see Carla Kilstead. She's a violinist in the Milwaukee area. I think it was Turner Hall. She's super avant-garde. Like, it was one of my easily top 3 concerts. It was awesome, and it was super intimate. There was maybe 30 people at this thing. Like, it was so small. It was so small. Like, to the point that they had a Q&A session in the middle of the concert. And I still remember one of the band members like, prior to being in this band, what TV show was she on as a kid? And like the audience got to like raise their hand like they're in a class, like and answer like as best they could. And the answer was Sesame Street. As a kid, she was on Sesame Street. Wow. I was like, that's amazing. I can't remember what I think I said like a game show or something like that for life of me. I can't remember, but that intimacy at the fact that I still remember that specific aspect of that concert resonates with me.
That's really cool. You definitely have a wide variety, but also those seeing someone in a huge arena versus even the small setting, it's definitely a different feel.
Oh, absolutely. Like actually, speaking of Mr. Joe, like he and I went to go see Paul Oakenfold in Chicago. Like, and it was awesome. Like, it was a House of Blues, I believe, and it just amazing. And we were definitely the most sober-minded people in that room, like hands down. That whole scene never took off for me, but like we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. And then might have been 2 weeks later, it's like, I guess I'm gonna go see Slipknot. Like, what? Like, what is this? Or Slightly Stupid, or like some other like crazy differentiator. But I think that's kind of as cliche as it is, the spice of life, right? Like, just don't judge it based on, I hate it when people say things like, I hate this genre. Like, you just throw everything out. It's like, well, that's not fair. Come on, man. Like, I hate country. Okay. Like, all of it, every single song that's been country ever, you hate all of it? Like, okay, that's a huge amount that you're just throwing out there for.
Well, because there's so many different subgenres of that. You have your, like, what I'm not a huge fan of your old country, just like the real old twangy slow. Like, I just couldn't ever get into that.
Yeah, like your original Hank Williams, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I just like, it doesn't do much for me. Okay. Not obviously very successful and great musicians, but I started getting into country in like the late 90s, early 2000s when it started becoming more like country pop.
Hmm.
But also, I also think it went a little too far where then it was just like, okay, this is just too much. Too much singing about the same love story where
Hmm.
then it kind of like, okay. And now I find myself I just was introduced last summer to Zach Bryan,
Oh, okay.
who who's not your necessary typical country, but he's been around for a while, and I had never heard of him, and I
Hmm.
was like, this guy is so good. So yeah, you have those different multitude of areas. So just saying I hate one thing, I
Yes.
like okay, well, glad you're open minded.
Yeah, well, I'll throw myself under the bus here. Like, I typically really like heavy metal music. I like rock and that kind of stuff. But I like heavy metal. But there's a point where I'm like, no, that turns me off. Like the like grumble Norwegian, I don't know what you're saying kind of stuff. Like that doesn't do anything for me. But like you throw, yeah, your Metallica's on, or like it can even be like a hardcore band, and I'll be like, all right, I get into this a little bit. Like that's cool. It's all depending on like just the spirit of it, I suppose. But um, I try not to use that hardcore differentiator of like I don't like this. Throw all of it out
Right.
because there are good morsels in there. You just have to be willing to look for them.
Great. That's the beauty of streaming music nowadays.
Oh my gosh, I that's isn't that amazing, like that we have that ability right now of like, gosh, what do I want to listen to? Oh, if only I had every song ever made in the world on my phone that's in my pocket. Like I think of that like when I'm in my car having the giant books of CDs, like,
So good.
well, better be driving and trying to find that one specific album by Korn. Like what? And now I'm like, Alexa, play, and then like, I got you. Like I can do that for you. Like that's amazing to me. Like we live in such privileged times.
We really do. And thinking of the thousands of dollars I sent over to iTunes
Oh my
for
gosh.
music I don't even own anymore.
Yep,
can I
yep.
can I get some of those back?
We're all just temporarily borrowing. Like, oh, all right. Well, like I on this topic of music, I was an avid CD collector. I had hundreds of CDs. Like I don't even want to think of how much money I spent on CDs because I would also be the guy that's like, oh, this band has like a limited edition release for like their first album. Well, then I gotta get that
Yeah.
because what am I, an idiot? Like, of course I gotta do that. Or like a first edition of this or whatever it happens to me. So like I would pursue those things. So I had, oh my God, I had an insurmountable amount of CDs. But between like moving, like for college and homes and apartments, and whatnot, you get tired of toting around like 17 totes of these jewel cases. You're like, and they don't get lighter. They don't get
No.
lighter. They just get heavier. You're like, okay, I got to do something here. And I remember my wife and we had a rummage sale. And I was like, okay, I just want to get rid of my CDs. I think I put them as like $1 a piece or something, like whatever. And I
Yeah.
always made sure to keep very good, like meticulous condition of my stuff. And I was at work. I still remember this. I was at work and she called me and said, there is a man and his daughter that are here. They're interested in your CDs. And I was like, neat. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't know what to tell you. She was like, no, they want to buy all of them. I'm like, okay, cool. We'll just like maybe do it for like 75 cents a piece or like whatever, 50. I don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever. And we're talking, no exaggeration, probably like 500 CDs, like
Oh
an insane amount. And they said, would you do it for $75? And as a broke like 20 something, yeah, I had an internal struggle. Like I had like signed CDs, like I had
Yeah.
so much stuff. And what broke me is I could hear the girl, she was like 13 in the background. I could hear her being like, "Oh my gosh, this is so awesome." Like I could just
Uh,
hear her excitement about
yeah.
all of that music. Like, oh, this is like the greatest Christmas gift ever. And it broke my heart. I was like, done. Just, yep. I'm like, I know they're going to a really good home.
Dad,
She
are you
seemed
sure?
happy.
I know you got laid off, but are you sure we can afford it for this Christmas?
Oh, don't you put that on me. Don't do that. Don't put that on me. This was in the middle of summer. So come on. But to me, it's a beautiful thing because I was able to pass that love on to
Yeah.
somebody else that hopefully if maybe she's listening. I don't know. Um, but hopefully she was able to get some enjoyment out of that and learn some things and see, wow, this one's been played a lot
Yeah.
apparently, or like, but I do, as far as the streaming stuff, what I do miss is looking at album art,
Yeah.
like the inserts, like reading all the stuff in there. And ooh, what did Tool put in their insert this time? Like, what crazy imagery did they do? Like, I do miss that part. That is definitely a lost art with
Mine
the
is
current era.
oh crap, I've been singing the wrong words for 3 weeks now.
That's okay. That's acceptable. And that's the thing though, like lyrics, depending on the band, they might be on your Amazon or whatever, your Spotify, like, oh, lyrics.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Most
guess
of
I
them
can
are.
play
Yeah.
along with them now. Like
Yeah.
it's got like the bouncing ball basically.
Yeah. That's a good time. So when my car got broken into once, actually at Boomer, speaking of,
Oh wow. Maybe it was
and
Meredith or
it might have been,
Mercedes or
yeah. But unfortunately, I must have terrible taste in music because they left my CDs. They did take my CD. They took my CD player that I had installed, but they left the CDs that were like right on the seat. So that was some humble pie I had on the way home. I couldn't listen to the music that I love because someone stole the CD player, but they left the music.
I think that's I think that's more insulting.
It,
Oh my gosh.
and
What is it with boomers and just destroying your ego?
I remember yelling at my friend Steve because I said, "Why didn't you lock the door?" And he's like, "I did, you ass." And I was like, "No, you didn't." The lock was busted out of his doors.
Oh no.
So I was like, he goes, "Come over here and look." And I like went around
Oh.
the car and I was like, "Well, I can't tell if you locked it or not." So,
Oh, come on. That's
uh,
awful.
yeah.
Now I want to know what was in that CD binder. Like, oh, 311 again, huh? Okay. Next.
Oh man, I've got one more question for you.
A fire away.
What career would you choose if you had to do it all over again?
Oh boy. Hmm.
Or I will add, if learning and development didn't exist.
Well, if that's the case, I really think I would have just tried to grit my teeth and stick with the education aspect of it. So um, I I did teach English and speech in high school for a very small stint, and I loved it. What I didn't love though is the politics that come with all of that, and I
Mhm.
just happened to fall into that world at a very tumultuous time in Wisconsin's history. Um, if you want to start trying to figure out what might have happened, it involved the unions and a
Yep.
governor. So I'll let you kind of put the pieces together.
Same
Um,
here.
but it was, yeah, it just, I remember being a young upstart teacher and being part like in these meetings, and they would talk to us about, what this all meant. And the whole time I'm just thinking like, this is not what I thought this was going to be. Like, I want to teach kids and I want I want them to see, the beauty of this world. I want them to be able to, be fluent and be critical thinkers and enjoy the arts of what we have here. So I said English and speech. So um, I was teaching like The Great Gatsby or All Quiet on the Western Front. And that was what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a part of, you know, union strikes and whatnot like that. And I applaud anybody that is in education right now. Like, you're amazing. Like, you're great. Like, I love my kids' teachers. They are phenomenal. I have high respect for anybody in those positions because they deal with far more behind the scenes than any parent knows.
Yep.
But I do think that if training or learning and development didn't exist, that would probably still be what I would do. I think I would just have to kind of grit my teeth and get through the part that I didn't like in order to get those morsels of things I did. Because the students were awesome. Like,
Yeah.
I loved the students and I loved the camaraderie. And it's crazy to me to think that when I started, I was only 5 years older than my oldest student. Like, that's crazy. And like, she and I would talk about that. I'm like, you realize, like, this is insanity. Like, huh? And she even thought it was funny. She's like, I don't know, like, whatever. I mean, she was wonderful. And I had a lot of really great kids that I still think about to this day. And I kept a lot of the like homework assignments or things like that kids did really well with. Like, just as that kind of memento for me, like,
Sure.
oh, I remember that. Education's always been something I've wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Teaching of any variety has always been the ticket. Since I've been like 12, I knew from that moment. I had a very inspirational 6th grade English teacher. He kind of is the one that showed me that it's not just boring words on a page. There's actual like depth behind it all. Which I know sounds super obvious to some, but as a budding 12-year-old, like, oh, this is fascinating. And then I had a really just absolutely influential 9th grade English teacher who I was in with Mr. Joe, as we talk about bringing things full circle.
Yeah.
She really inspired me to get into the actual education sector. That was really my calling. And so I dedicated my time to just learning and like, what is it to learn? What is it to engage in that experience? And I did that. And that's what led me here. So I think just being adaptable was part of where I ended up now. Just being able to take that and apply it into a different sector that, to your credit, if you'd have asked high school Steve or even maybe 20-year-old Steve, I didn't really fully grasp what learning and development was. I knew what education was, but I didn't know about that specific sector.
There's a lot of transferable skills that when I looked into, I tell this story often where when I knew I wanted to get out of teaching, I didn't know what was out there. And I Googled what can teachers do? Like,
sounds silly, but I agree with you. Yeah. You just don't know.
Training development, learning development, however, talent development, however you want to phrase it, that was there. And I started looking into, and then I'm thinking, dang, why didn't I go get my degree in, like human resources or something along those lines? But again, I wouldn't have landed where I am today without the teaching experience. Led me to manufacturing, which led me to entertainment, which led me to where I'm at now. And so it all kind of, again, comes full circle, and it allows those skills that we can adapt from teaching to just training adults who sometimes act like kids. And so it works out.
100%. The amount of times I would get my dog ate my homework. It's still like right now.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, especially when it was like an all virtual environment. I didn't get that email. That is just my dog ate my homework. Like, but you did. You know how I know that? Because you replied to me, and I have it. Like, that's the beauty of digital. Like, it's right here. That's okay though.
The version of a student not showing up to class is adults not coming to meetings.
Oh gosh, yeah, I don't have time for that. No, I'm skipping out. Yes. And I think the greatest transferable skill for a teacher into the corporate learning sector is classroom management. Like, I
Yeah.
really do. You can take all the buzzwords and the trends and curriculum develop. You can take all of that, and that's all very important stuff. But classroom management, just being able to manage different generations, different like corporate level structures within one singular group, and get them all to align. If you can do that, you will succeed.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think that's huge.
Yeah, I
Well,
yeah. Sorry.
I'm say I'm just I think you in the education field is definitely where you should be. I'm glad you didn't say comedian. I didn't want to burst your bubble.
Well, I thought about being a model for a minute.
Oh yeah.
That was actually pre 20 years ago, though.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah. I was gonna say because you
yeah,
definitely wouldn't get hired.
yeah.
Well then or
Um,
now,
they do
but
say I have a face like Steve Buscemi, which I'm not really quite sure how to take that.
that holds true. Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
can
He's a handsome man.
I can
Don't you put that curse on him?
I can see it. Yeah. Well, maybe if his face was run over by a dump truck.
Hmm. With spikes, because you got to make sure that you have traction in the winter.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Well, Steve, this has been so fun.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I've really sincerely been enjoying the podcast. It's a nice breath of fresh air. It gives me something just nice and relaxing and fun to listen to. I've certainly found myself like in my car driving to work, going like, "Oh yeah, I really like that. That's a great point." The gentleman that you had on, the musician,
Jake,
Jake,
yes.
thank you.
Yep.
I loved that conversation. He actually said something that was really it just really was profound to me, and it was something along, I'm paraphrasing it, so
Yeah.
Jake, sorry, I'm paraphrasing you, buddy. He said something about like, as being a musician and being up on stage, you just have to be your true self.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. Like, it's just a nice simple way of approaching life. Just always be your genuine self. That's always going to come through far more than you trying to be a social chameleon
Mhm.
and trying to just adapt. Be yourself. Be yourself, and people will gravitate towards that. So, Patrick, thank you for having me. I
Of
really
course.
appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. This was super fun, and I'm glad we were able to spend some time and talk.
Especially with the
I
Ugly Club,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. I mean, the unfortunate thing is that this interview is going to be useless. I doubt I can get
Oh,
an episode out of this. But so,
I get it.
I mean, assuming my computer's going to crash once I.
Is it going to be like the movie The Ring, where all the audio and the video is just going to be distorted after we try listening to it? It's just going to
Probably.
sound like jarbled madness.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
imagine.
our the way we look translates to audio. Well, we tried.
Guess we'll never do that again.
Yeah.
I might try to call a acquaintance of mine who does voiceovers to maybe
Mm.
replace our voices, or at least
Would you?
yours. I don't know.
Mine especially. I will apologize to anybody listening out there that you had to listen to this nasally goodness. And you should be somewhat fortunate, because Patrick, being the gentleman that he is, allowed me to delay this a couple of weeks because my house got destroyed by sickness. So the day that I was originally supposed to do this, I was wildly under the weather and I was
Well,
very plugged up.
yeah, and I put a lot of effort into finding a replacement, and unfortunately everyone was booked. So I do appreciate you being here, Steve.
Oh, good. All right.
Oh
Well,
man, no, this. Thank you so much again, Steve. This was so
oh,
fun.
thank you. I had a really great time. Thank you so very much. If anybody ever feels like giving a shout out to me on LinkedIn, go right ahead. Steve Council, just shoot me a message, shoot me a message, post. I don't really care. Because I plan on putting something about this on there because this is exciting. This is fun.
Yes, for sure. And you cannot find him on Facebook, so please do not look for Steve
Nope.
Council on Facebook.
And I'm not telling my Reddit username. So
Good.
Take that.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much.
Well, I really don't know if there's much to add in the post conversation wrap up here. That was really, really fun. If you had as much fun as I did and you want to follow along with Steve Council, you can do so on LinkedIn and look him up. Stephen Cornelius. Council is Counsell. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next week.